I want to thank Stephanie for that introduction and for so much more. I'm fortunate to know her. I was especially fortunate to have her come into Minnesota and run my campaign. And the most efficient campaign, I think, in the history of the Senate. We won by 312 votes. We didn't waste one bit of effort. Everywhere that Stephanie goes, good things happen, and Emily's List is very lucky to have her, and I'm so glad she's there, and they're going to have the same kind of success with Stephanie that I had. So thank you so much. I want to thank Marcos for his leadership of the Daily Coast community and for insisting that Democrats fight for our values. That was an interesting idea, wasn't it? I want to thank the organizers of Netroots Nation once again for putting on the most exciting progressive get-together of the year. In fact, I'd say the most exciting political get-together of the year without guns. And since we're in Nevada, and by the way, it's Nevada, not Nevada, and it's Las Vegas, not Las Vegas, I want to thank Leader Harry Reid. You know, Harry's in a tough fight this year, but I know he's going to pull it out. This guy is as tough as they come, and I respect and admire him tremendously. So, who remembers 5 years ago? Good for you. I'm not at a Grateful Dead concert. 5 years ago, President George W. Bush had just feared and smeared his way to re-election. Republicans had consolidated their hold on Congress and were planning a destructive agenda, starting with the privatization of Social Security. The right-wing echo chamber controlled our discourse, and big money dominated our elections. And it felt like a permanent Republican majority was in the offing. It was really pretty miserable. But some folks out there had built a new progressive infrastructure to help turn our misery into motivation. And as our frustration grew, so did our movement. Over at the Center for American Progress, they were building an incubator for cutting-edge progressive policy ideas. At Media Matters, they were building an organization to challenge the dominance of the right-wing echo chamber and hold the mainstream media accountable for being so easily bamboozled. And all over the country, progressives were logging on to Daily Coast and other sites, building a community of smart, passionate, and creative men and women from all walks of life. As a satirist, I was able to do a few things. I helped get a liberal radio network called Air America off the ground so that we could finally hear our voices on the airwaves alongside the Limbaughs and Hannitys of the world. Following up on my previous book, Lies and the Lying Liars Who Tell Them, a fair and balanced look at the right, which even today makes a great gift. I wrote a book called The Truth with Jokes, an inspirational call to action that also contained jokes. I started a political action committee called Midwest Values PAC so that I could support candidates around the country who shared our values, and I invited everyone to join with me. That year we raised over $1 million, and we supported Senate candidates like Sherrod Brown and John Tester and Claire McCaskill and Bernie Sanders and Jim Webb and Sheldon Whitehouse, who became Senator Brown and Senator Tester and Senator McCaskill and Senator Sanders and Senator Webb and Senator Whitehouse. So when I think back on it, it turns out that 5 years ago was a pretty exciting time after all. And when we stopped the Bush agenda in its tracks, taking back the Congress in 2006, we were a little giddy. We felt like we'd won the upset of the century. Then the 2008 campaign started, and all of a sudden the Netroots had become a real factor. Presidential candidates started showing up at Netroots Nation and posting diaries at Daily Kos. The blogosphere was driving the discourse both in newsrooms and campaign war rooms. At some point, YouTube became a verb. And it wasn't just what we were doing online that was making a difference. We took the energy of the Netroots and its spirit of people-powered activism, and we translated it into a grassroots organizing force that I think we all remember being part of and will remember being part of for the rest of our lives. When I ran for the Senate in 2008, I was constantly inspired by the strength, dedication, and creativity of this community, which reminds me, thanks. Thank you. More than 200,000 people made a contribution to my campaign, most of them online. That's the sort of support that comes in handy when you find yourself, say, spending 8 months fighting a protracted recount battle. But leaving money aside, for the moment anyway, my campaign relied heavily on the community that progressives had built online. People from all backgrounds were coming up with new ways to talk to voters and sharing their ideas with each other. We tapped into that creativity to build web-based tools for caucus organizing, canvassing, and, yes, for the recount. And it made a huge difference, believe me. And the conversation online made a real impact on the coverage of the race. When the mainstream media, relying on bad information, was pronouncing us dead during the recount, it was bloggers like Nate Silver who were able to change the conventional wisdom. Meanwhile, the Uptake, my state's own homegrown source for citizen journalism, the Uptake was showing the world that Minnesota is not Florida, and that our victory was fair and legitimate. By 2008, everyone knew that the Internet was important, even if they believed it was a series of tubes. Which, by the way, it is not. What we proved in that campaign is that the Internet is not the whole point. The Internet is a tool, and progressives have found a way to use it to organize without the benefit of institutional power. In our community, your relevance is determined by what you have to say, not by how big a megaphone you've got. The traditional barriers to participation, to power, do not apply. That philosophy applied to our politics can win and has won elections. That philosophy applied to our government can change and has changed the country. There's